Have you ever loved someone who felt like home and a war zone at the same time? Someone who understood you on a level that almost scared you, and then became the source of your deepest emotional pain? Where you felt completely seen and completely misunderstood, almost in the same breath. If you've been an INTJ or INFJ in a relationship with the other type, you already know exactly what I mean. People love to romanticize this pairing. Rare intellectual bond. Meeting of rare minds. And sure, there's truth to that. But nobody talks honestly about why this pairing also hurts in a way that's almost impossible to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. That's exactly what we're doing today. 1. The connection that feels almost unreal. Both INTJs and INFJs are rare type. They both live in their heads, hate small talk, and crave meaning in everything they do. So when these two actually sit down and talk, really talk, it feels electric. Like the conversation has no ceiling. Like finally, someone gets it. But a powerful connection at the start doesn't guarantee the relationship will be smooth. Sometimes the stronger the initial pull, the harder the eventual fall. And with INTJs and INFJs, that fall can be genuinely devastating. 2. The NI mirror effect, and why it's a trap. Here's where it gets interesting. Both INTJs and INFJs share the exact same dominant function, introverted intuition, or NI. In plain terms, both of them process the world through deep, quiet pattern recognition. They're always connecting dots, sensing what's coming, reading between the lines of everyone around them. So when an INTJ meets an INFJ, something strange happens. For the first time, maybe ever, they meet someone who just gets it. No long explanations. No dumbing things down. Just instant, almost wordless understanding. That's the magic. But it's also the trap. Because this instant connection creates expectations that are almost impossible to keep up with. Once you've felt truly understood by someone, you start expecting that understanding to cover everything, including the parts of you that NI simply can't reach. And when two people share the same dominant function, they also end up competing in subtle ways they don't even notice. Both of them trust their inner vision deeply. Both feel like they're the one who truly sees the situation. When those visions clash, neither wants to back down, because their intuition doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like truth. That's the first silent crack. It doesn't show up right away. But it's there from day one. 3. The feeling versus thinking divide is bigger than it looks. This is where things start to hurt. After processing the world through intuition, INFJs run everything through an emotional filter. Extrovert feeling, or FE. They ask, how does this affect people? Is this kind? Emotions aren't just feelings for an INFJ, they're data. They're guidance. They physically carry the emotional atmosphere of every room they walk into. INTJs do something completely different. After intuition, they run everything through extrovert thinking, TE. Logic, structure, efficiency. What's the most rational path forward? For the INTJ, emotions can sometimes feel like interference in an otherwise clean signal. So picture this. The INFJ comes to the INTJ feeling upset, maybe about something small, a rude comment from a coworker. All they want is to feel heard. But the INTJ, wired for solutions, jumps straight into problem-solving mode. Just tell them to stop. Why does it even bother you? To the INTJ, that's love in action, fixing the problem. To the INFJ, it feels like their emotional world just got dismissed. Neither one did anything wrong on purpose. They're just speaking two completely different emotional languages. And that mismatch, left unaddressed, wears a relationship down faster than almost anything else. 4. The two masks that face each other. Here's something that rarely gets said. Both INTJs and INFJs wear masks, just different kinds. The INFJ wears the peacekeeper mask. The one that smooths things over and agrees when they don't really agree. The INTJ wears the competence mask. The one that looks unbothered and in control, even when they're struggling underneath. The problem is these masks end up facing each other instead of coming off. The INFJ keeps performing harmony instead of stating their real needs. The INTJ keeps performing calm instead of admitting they're overwhelmed. And that gap, between the mask and the truth, is exactly where loneliness sneaks into an otherwise close relationship. 5. The silent war, when two private people stop talking. One of the strangest and most painful features of this pairing is what happens during conflict. Neither INTJs nor INFJs are naturally confrontational. Both withdraw, process internally, and return only when they've partly sorted things out on their own. Sounds manageable, right? But when both people do this at the same time, what you get is a silence that feels like a wall. The INFJ goes quiet partly to protect the other person from the full weight of what they're feeling. But that silence also carries a warning, a pre-door slam state, and INFJs know it. The INTJ, meanwhile, goes silent because they're genuinely analyzing the situation, trying to figure out what went wrong. To the INTJ, silence is productive. To the INTJ's silence during conflict feels like abandonment. Then the roles reverse. When the INFJ eventually expresses their feelings, because Faye needs an outlet, the INTJ can feel overwhelmed by what reads as an emotional flood. They say something that sounds analytical or deflective. The INFJ feels unheard. And the cycle starts again. Both are in genuine pain. Neither can explain clearly what they actually need. Around and around they go. 6. The INFJ's empathy becomes their burden. Here's something that rarely gets discussed. In this pairing, the INFJ's greatest gift can become their greatest source of suffering. INFJs absorb the emotional states of the people they're closest to, and INTJs under stress radiate a cold, focused intensity that the INFJ doesn't just observe, they internalize. When an INTJ is stressed, they go into efficiency lockdown. Sharper, more withdrawn, less patient with anything that feels like a distraction, including conversations about feelings. The INFJ picks this up immediately and starts asking, "What did I do wrong? How do I fix this?" Meanwhile, the INTJ isn't even thinking about the relationship. They're just trying to solve whatever external problem is consuming them. So the INFJ ends up silently carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. And because they rarely say, "I'm absorbing your stress and it's hurting me," the INTJ remains completely unaware. This asymmetry, one person giving enormous emotional energy while the other doesn't even know it's happening, quietly hollows out the relationship over time. 7. The shadow function flip. Nobody warns you about this. Under serious, prolonged stress, both types can flip into a version of themselves that shocks even the people closest to them. Psychologists call this the shadow function taking over. An overwhelmed INFJ, normally warm and accommodating, can suddenly turn cold, sharp, and cutting. The gentle, empathetic person you know starts sounding harsh and detached. For an INTJ partner, this shift is genuinely disorienting. It doesn't last forever, but if you don't recognize it for what it is, you take it personally, when really, it's a signal that the INFJ has been running on empty for far too long, quietly absorbing stress without ever asking for help. INTJs have their own version. Normally calm and logical, an overwhelmed INTJ can suddenly become unusually emotional, clingy, insecure, irrationally critical of the relationship itself. For an INFJ used to their partner being the steady, unshakable one, this feels disorienting. Almost scary. But here's the truth. Neither of these is a personality change. Both are temporary overloads. Recognizing them as such, instead of treating them as betrayals, can turn a confusing, painful moment into a real chance for closeness. 8. The idealization crash. Both types are prone to idealization, and this creates one of the most dangerous early relationship patterns imaginable. INFJs see potential so vividly that they start relating to the ideal version of the INTJ rather than the actual person. INTJs build a precise internal model of their partner and resist updating it when new information comes in. When both people are relating to idealized versions of each other, the collision with reality is brutal. The INFJ realizes the INTJ isn't going to magically become warmer just because the connection is deep. The INTJ realizes the INFJ isn't the endlessly harmonious partner they imagined. Both are left with a grief that's hard to name, not a breakup grief, but a mourning for something they believed they had. 9. Why both types are terrible at asking for what they need. Both are notoriously bad at stating their needs directly, but for different reasons. The INFJ doesn't ask because they fear being a burden, or because they expect a compatible partner to simply know. The INFJ is so attuned to others that they assume the same attunement flows back naturally. When it doesn't, they feel invisible. The INTJ doesn't ask because they've spent a lifetime meeting their own needs independently, and because translating emotional needs into words feels almost foreign. Tay wants to solve problems, not narrate internal state. What you get is two people with real needs, neither asking for those needs to be met, both slowly building sadness or resentment, and neither saying a word about it. 10. The door slam meets the wall. If you follow personality content at all, you've heard of the INFJ door slam, that moment when an INFJ reaches their absolute limit and exits a person from their inner world, sometimes permanently. What people don't talk about enough is what happens when an INFJ is pushed to that point by an INTJ's wall. Because INTJs have walls. Real, carefully maintained walls. Not out of cruelty, but out of a lifetime of finding that most people can't be trusted with their interior. The INTJ's wall isn't hostility. It's protection. But to an INFJ, whose deepest need is genuine mutual intimacy, hitting that wall over and over again feels like rejection. Not once. Repeatedly. The INFJ compensates, adapts, tries approaching from different angles, but every INFJ has a point where they stop trying. And when the door slams, the INTJ is genuinely blindsided, because from where they were standing, nothing catastrophic had happened. They didn't see the years of accumulated quiet pain. They didn't realize the INFJ had been slowly withdrawing while still physically present. And by the time they understand what's happened, the INFJ is already gone. Not just physically, but in every way that counts. 11. What this pairing actually teaches you. Whether it ends or survives, this relationship always leaves both people changed. It teaches the INTJ that intelligence alone cannot sustain intimacy, that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is simply let someone feel. It teaches the INFJ that love shouldn't require silently absorbing what isn't yours to carry, that vulnerability has to flow both ways. And for both of them, this pairing holds up a mirror like few others can. Similar enough to understand each other. Different enough to challenge each other in exactly the places that most need it. Closing. So here's where we land. The INTJ-INFJ pairing hurts the way it does not because these two types are incompatible, but because they are similar enough to create the illusion of perfect understanding, while being different enough in their emotional architecture to keep missing each other in the places that matter most. The NI mirror creates instant magic and quiet power struggles. The Tay versus Faye gap creates misunderstandings neither person intended. The masks create distance neither person wanted. And the idealization sets up a crash that neither person saw coming. But awareness changes everything. The INFJ needs to stop expecting the INTJ to read their emotional signals and start saying what they need out loud, clearly, without resentment. The INTJ needs to stretch past logic and offer emotional presence, not because it comes naturally, but because love sometimes means speaking a language that isn't your first. When both people make those stretches, what grows is genuinely rare. Two people who think in long-range patterns, who value depth over surface, who can sit in silence and then talk for hours about what actually matters. That's extraordinary. If this hit home, you know what to do.